Stories that matter. The journey of life from birth to death is an extraordinary trip, sometimes filled with great joy and excitement, but at other times filled with pain, sorrow, and disappointment. Stories That Matter shares both extremes with you. Sometimes our stories will make you feel very happy, but the journey of life is not all happiness. Other times, the journey of life will make you feel sad, for all of us have experienced both extremes. Stories That Matter will begin right after the break with a story that will touch your heart in the journey of life.
Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, and he is a special guest. Delighted to have him here. It's Mike Luskey. And Mike, thank you. Thank you for
Doug.
being here. It's a long trip to come in from Meade.
Right.
And you're the general manager and the CEO of one of the most popular radio stations, at least it is in our world.
Well,
KJIL.
happy to hear that, yes.
Yeah, we enjoy it, the work that you put into it. Tell me about how you got started in this industry, because I don't know anybody that just walks out of school and then walks into the job that you now have.
Right.
So tell me about your background.
Well, I went off to college, University of Oklahoma, to be an architect. And after a year of that, I decided I didn't want to sit behind a drafting table and you had to know a lot more math than I was ready for. So I looked around, thought, what else could I do? And ventured over to the journalism department and got signed up, and that led to a door opening in a rock station in Oklahoma City, and worked there doing the midday shift for a while. And so that's how I got my start. And you know, I look back now, and the Lord led me to that, even though I wasn't walking with Him. He used that experience way back to you know, get me started in Oklahoma City, and then eventually 10 years later to bring us to Meade, Kansas.
He knew exactly what he was going to be using you for later, didn't he?
He did. I had no clue, but he did.
And so how many hours a day would you have been on the air at Oak City?
4 hours a day, Monday through Friday. And it was, you know, rock station, and I was in college, and I was on top of the world. At least I thought I was, living quite a worldly lifestyle, and thought I was having a lot of fun. And I look back on it now and realize, well, even then I realized how empty that lifestyle was. But just so thankful that the Lord used architecture to get me into radio, to get me into Christian radio eventually. So in the late well, around 1990, I'd actually left radio. I felt, after I came to the Lord, felt Him calling me to leave secular radio. And so I did, and thinking, okay, we're done with radio. This is it. He wants me to go do something different. And so for about a year, I did different things. I did some video production. And then eventually He opened a door at a new Christian station in Oklahoma City. I thought, wow, I like this station. If I could work there, Lord, that'd be great. So I sent Him a tape. A year later, I was working there, or not, a week later, I was working there in Oklahoma City again. And after about a year and a half there, that led to an opportunity to come to Meade, Kansas, and KJIL. Been there 26 years now.
When you had the opportunity to come to Meade, they were almost a brand new station, just getting their feet under them, maybe a year's worth. 2 years?
Well, actually, they'd been on the air about 2 months when we came.
2 months.
So it was brand new, but you know, the history of that goes back even further into the 80s, because it takes a lot of planning. You don't just throw a radio station on the air. So there's quite a bit of history and stories about the Lord just opening doors and bringing this ministry about, that it's just been all Him. It's all Him. As you get to know us, you realize we're not the smartest cookies in the bunch. So it had to be Him. From what He started as just one station to over 50 signals today, I mean, it's just God.
Yeah, it absolutely is. We were talking before we went on air about the fact that Reverend White came in from, was it Chicago?
I believe so.
I think so. Came in from Chicago,
right,
and landed in that general area. And he had a vision for it, along with a number of farmers and other people. Am I pretty much on track?
Right. He came to Meade, Kansas, pastored at Emmanuel Mennonite Church, and he had a vision to start a translator out of Chicago. It would be Moody Broadcasting, and that's all it was. It would cover about 20 miles, very low power, and that was great. And he got a couple of farmers on board with that, and God gave him a bigger vision and said, hey, I want you to start this full power station that would cover all of southwest Kansas, Dodge City, Garden City, and Liberal. And so they pursued that. And for a bunch of farmers to tackle the FCC, that's a pretty good undertaking. But farmers, they get things done.
They do.
And they work hard. And so for about 6, 7, 8 years, they did fundraising. They jumped through all the FCC hoops. And in 1992, they finally saw all that work come to fruition when KJIL signed on for the first time.
Were you the first DJ?
No, we came about 2 months later, and they had a very small crew. Our first crew, we had 5 people. Now we have upwards of 20 plus, but there was 5 of us, and so signed on in September of 1992, and like I said, nobody had the idea that it would become what it has become 20-some years later.
That took a bit of a leap of faith for you to leave Oklahoma City and come to Meade. When we come back from break, we're going to talk about it. You're watching Stories That Matter with Mike Luskey. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Mike Luskey. And Mike, in case you don't know, is the GM, CEO of KJIL and that network, and that we were just talking before we cut away to break how much and how far that has grown and how the Lord's hand's been all over that project. Here's one really good example of it, because we were talking about it on break, is that Reverend White, the Mennonite pastor who moves into the community. Time goes on and he has, of course, family, and one of his kids, David A.R. White.
Yes, yes.
And David A.R. White decides to go on to Los Angeles, and no experience in it, says, I think I'll be an actor. And he goes out and becomes an actor, and a very successful one.
Yes.
And then he writes a book, God Is Not Dead, turns it into a movie.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. High school kid from Meade, Kansas, goes on to produce God's Not Dead. And what that's become over the years, very successful, and spreading the good news of Jesus. So I guess the White family has quite the communications background, from radio to movies.
Yeah, and it's, well, we know whose hand's on it, because the way these came about, it's just like it always does, just like the example that you gave, that I'm playing rock music in Oklahoma City, and then I get a chance to work at a Christian station. And I said, kind of like that. And then here comes an opportunity to go out to Meade, Kansas, and a pretty isolated area in comparison to Oklahoma City.
Right.
And then look how the Lord's turned that into an amazing event, because your voices go out over very wide territory. And there's so many people that absolutely listen to it, and they do so for a good reason, because you guys are very relaxed on air, and you've got the underlying message. Can't be any more clear. And people would say, I always remember this part about it when we did a show with Vivian Vance, not with her, but about her. And her sister told the story about when Lucy would go out to the supermarket, and people would come up to her, and that's was the early days of television, and they would come up and start talking to her. And then they would walk off and finish their story. And Lucy used to think, how do I know that person? Why can't I remember that person's name? And it wasn't until about the 3rd, 4th week of being in grocery stores and people coming up that she said, how do I know you? And the woman said, you're in my house every night. Every Saturday night you're in my house. And then she realized what the power of television was and how it was reaching people, and people felt like they knew her.
Right.
You run across that too when you go somewhere and somebody recognizes your voice?
From time to time. Yeah, I had to give up making prank phone calls years ago, because I get busted every time.
They said, what do you want, Mike? Now cut it out.
No, it's we love what we do because of who we serve, and that's God. Our mission is very simple: love God and love people. And by loving God and serving Him through Christian radio, people are blessed by what they hear and experience when they listen to KJIL, and it furthers the kingdom, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Tell me about some of the staff that you work with on a daily basis. Elvin, of course, is when you hear your name, we hear his name too, and then we hear him on the air, and it's always fantastic because he does a great job with it. I wouldn't want to try to read some of the words that he reads and gets the names right, and then if it gets messed up, why you just, well, you messed that one up, Delvin, or something like that. And yeah, I did, and it's just pretty relaxed. Tell me about him.
Delvin's a great guy. He went to the Oklahoma State University, so we have a little bit of rivalry because I'm an OU guy. But we have a lot of fun during football season. He has a news background. He loves covering news, reporting news, and it's great that he has a wonderful sense of humor too.
Yeah.
We just have a great crew. I mean, it makes my job way easier. So from Delvin doing the news to Linda Emig on with us in the morning, she's a blessing. Kind of balances out the knuckleheads, the rest of us on the air. So
that calming voice in there, huh?
Yep, voice of reason, and she's a good sport. We give her a hard time. So I mean, we just we really are blessed by having wonderful folks, and getting a good number of them to come to Meade, Kansas is not easy. As you mentioned, when we left Oklahoma City to go to Meade, Kansas, all my radio friends were going like, "You're going where?" Yeah. Because in broadcasting, it's always you move up to the next bigger market,
right?
Kind of a stepping stone. And I had to admit I didn't quite understand it myself, other than he said go, and so we did, as he has with the others that have come along over the years. We've had great people come through the doors on air and off the air. And they all had a purpose for being there for that time. God always brings along a great replacement when somebody leaves. The thing is, we rarely have people leave, and that's great. We have very little turnover. So what you hear on the radio station, as far as the announcers, the personalities, that's just who we are. We're not trying to be fake with our fake radio voices. We're just who we are, and we love hanging out with people. That's one of the things we like to say too. We love living life here in the heartland with everybody. So we're through the good times and bad, and you'll see us out shopping at the grocery store or at concerts and different events, and we love that. We love visiting with people and just sharing how God is using the radio station in their lives.
I know in the situation with Delvin, if most people didn't look into it some, but I've heard you guys on the radio allude to it, that his father's a pastor, and is he a worship singer? Delvin is?
Yes.
I'm assuming he's got a really good voice, because I think I've heard him mess around with it a little bit, and I said, wow, I wish I could sing just like that, and he's not even trying.
Yeah, he leads worship at his church. His brother's a pastor too, so good background, good folks. So if whenever we sing happy birthday, we have a birthday party for the staff, he leads that, because the rest of us
can't sing. You can tag along, but you can't lead, huh?
Right.
I'm familiar with that. And of course, you've got Linda Emig, and Linda's from our area. We're shooting this right now at the Auto Racing Museum in Chapman, and Linda attends church with us at Emmanuel Church in Abilene, and she is an absolute joy to work with. She helps in the kitchen with my wife on Wednesday nights when they feed, and it's tremendous. And her husband's a pastor also, and just really, really good people. Now you've got one on there that's by the name of, I'm not sure what his name is, and when we come back from break, I'm going to ask you about it, because I've heard so many names that he's been called that and pretty soon I heard him one time on the radio say, well, I'm not real sure what my name is anymore. And so when we come back from break, we're going to talk about Blake a little bit, and we'll go from there. So you're watching Stories That Matter. Welcome to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Mike Luskey. If you don't know who Mike is, you missed the first part of this show, or you haven't been listening to your radio much, but Mike is the on-air voice at KJIL, and he's also the GM and CEO, and probably several other titles that they give him, but he doesn't just necessarily know that. And Mike, before we cut away to break, we were talking about some of the staff that works with you. And you have Blake Carter. And I hear him on the radio. They called the Blakester and multiple other names, and I've heard him even say, I'm not sure what my name is. Sometimes I get a call and I can't remember exactly what my name is. Tell me about him.
Oh, Blake's great, and I'm the reason he has so many names. I just Skippy Jr. We like to call him Skippy too. But
I take it he's a young guy.
he is young. He's I think he's maybe 30 now, but
30?
when he started he was late 20s, and so most of us are 40s and 50s, and so we need somebody younger to give us that perspective, and also somebody younger to do all the technical stuff that the old folks don't quite grasp anymore. So Blake's great. He's a good sport, and he's funny too, and he's a blessing. And he actually started out listening to KJIL when he was in grade school.
Really?
When we first came on, he was living in Coldwater, Kansas, I believe, and he'd listened to Adventures in Odyssey. And he says somewhere along the way he called and wanted to talk to somebody at KJIL about how do you get into broadcasting, and he ended up talking to me. And I said, I guess I must not have told you to run for your life because you're here. So God used those early days of KJIL to bring Blake along to be a full-time staff member now.
You didn't tell him about, well, Blake, you need to go to Oklahoma City and you need to get in a rock station for a while, and then you need to have the Lord give you the calling and bring you out. He bypassed the other part of it.
Yeah, he didn't go through the knocking his head against a brick wall broadcasting experience. So he did work in secular radio briefly out of college, and wasn't too much longer. They ended up with us, and we're happy to have him. Like I said earlier, we just have an amazing staff, a great crew. We get along. We enjoy each other's company, and we love serving the Lord and working hard for the kingdom.
Yeah. Well, and that shows that you can hear that on the air. Blake just got married like maybe 2 years ago, 3 years. Is that right? I can remember that you guys were talking about it on the air, and that's awesome. Tell me about your family.
Well, I have my wonderful wife, Brenda. Been married a little over 30 years, and she's just a blessing to me. I'd be lost without her,
I understand.
as all of us guys would be lost without our wives. And we have our oldest son, Sean, working his way through school. He's trying to go through debt-free, so he may be
good for him.
40 by the time he graduates. But
it'll be debt-free. That same as going through and paying that long.
No, he loves the Lord, and he's a bit of a ski bum. He likes to go to Colorado and snowboard a lot, and just a great guy. Our youngest son is in Oklahoma City, Andrew. Another super guy too, and doing well in Oklahoma City. So we like to go back and visit him and see some of our old friends from time to time when we're back that way, going to a Thunder game or a Oklahoma football game. And I still have family in Oklahoma, so we're not too far away. Part of the blessing about being in western Kansas is we're only 3-hour drive from my mom, so she likes that.
Where's your mom live?
Enid, Oklahoma.
Oh, Enid.
That's where I grew up.
Yeah, and is your dad deceased?
He passed away about 16 years ago. He was in the Air Force, a career Air Force man, and that's how we ended up in Enid. He was stationed at Vance Air Force Base at retirement time, and they are from Minnesota, and they did not want to go back to the cold winters of Minnesota, so we became Oklahoma family.
Yeah. No grandkids yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, well, listen, that's a whole different stage, and that's great.
Yep.
I hear on the radio a number of times that something will trigger it, and you will just break into, well, this is time for Dominick the Donkey.
Oh.
How does that happen?
We don't know. We really don't know how that happens. It's just, I found that somewhere years ago, and I thought, well, this would be nice for we do a Christmas countdown, counting down the days to Christmas, and sometimes we'll do it in February and then March, not very often, but this time of year, the end of the year, we do it quite often just to count down the days till Christmas.
Many times that's the only way I know how close we're getting is because you'll say, well, we're 237 days until Christmas, and now as it gets closer it's more relevant to us, but it's always fun to hear.
Yeah, I'm assuming that Dominick the Donkey song, I think it was from the 50s or 60s, and I have no background on it other than it's kind of campy and cute, and we like to use it.
Yeah, and it is good. It's good. I like it. So one of the problems that every facility has is funding everything. How do you do KJIL? Because you don't have advertising per se.
Right.
So how do you do it?
Well, we are a non-commercial, listener-supported radio ministry, 501c3. We do have underwriters, businesses that you'll hear on that underwrite a bit of support. So it's not advertising; it's sponsorship. But the majority of our funding comes from individual donations. About 75% is just people out of the goodness of their heart wanting to support the ministry, and in doing so, they want it available to others to come experience. And so we say our mission is to love God, love people, but part of that is encouraging, fellow believers and walking together in our faith. And the other aspect of that is to be a light to the lost. So as people are searching, trying to find their way home, if God uses KJIL as part of that, then we're just thrilled.
Yeah, yeah. And we're putting up on the screen, you'll see the website information, the contact information, you'll see the pictures of the staff, and if you want to contribute financially, and I hope that you do, because this serves a tremendous asset for the community, for all that listen to it. And I can be down in the dumps and I can listen to that, and that will bring me up, and it reminds me, Lord, you're in control. Doesn't matter what's going on around me. I'm sure you get a lot of those calls of people saying, Mike, thank you.
Well, just the right song at just the right time. We hear that, and that is not us knowing that you need to hear that song. That's God knowing that you need to hear that song for whatever is going on in your life. And we hear that over and over and over, and so we know that's the Lord working in the lives of so many, and that pleases us.
Yeah. Now, not only being GM, but CEO. So CEO, does that mean that you're the business aspect of this? You've got to make sure that everything's being done. Is that part of the duties?
That's part of it. I guess when things go wrong, somebody has to take the blame. So they say, you're CEO. Okay, that's you.
Yeah.
But the good news is things generally don't go too far south. So it's an honor and a privilege to have been asked to be GM and CEO for the last 7 years or so.
You're doing an excellent job at it. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Stories That Matter with Mike Luskey. Welcome back to Stories That Matter. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my special guest, Mike Luskey. And Mike, we're coming towards the end of the show, and if a person wants to stay in closer contact with KJIL, how do they do it?
Well, website is great to find out more about us, kjil.com. We also have a phone app. It's a free download. You search your app store for KJIL. It goes right on your smartphone. You can listen to us on the go. You can see what songs just played. You can also give to the ministry through our website and the phone app as well. But those are great opportunities for you to learn about the ministry and find out what it is we do. We cover such a huge area from Kansas all the way to Oklahoma and into the Texas Panhandle, and it's just what God has, I guess, charged us to do, and that's to serve His people in this area.
Yeah. Yeah, and Mike, I know you guys participate in some fashion in either promoting or bringing in a lot of talent. Do you promote them, or do you actually book them in concert?
A little bit of both. I mean, over the years, we've had the Newsboys, Mercy Me, Casting Crowns, Toby Mac. It's just all been an exciting adventure.
Just awesome people. Awesome. Mike, thank you so much for
Doug.
taking the time to come out
Sure.
from Meade out to Chapman, and thank you so much for sharing this.
Thank you.
You've been watching Stories That Matter.